Ira Glass is easily one of my favorite audio storytellers of all time. There's a viral soundbite specifically from Ira that impacted me massively as a teenager. A soundbite that I really need Ira to make part 2 of, because the lesson is just so important, but it's missing something. It's missing a massive thing about what to do if you actually follow the advice that he lays out. So the viral soundbite is called The Gap. I highly recommend going and listening to it. Essentially, he lays out that nobody tells beginners when they're starting that there's going to be a massive gap between what they envision they're going to make and the actual end results. He calls this their taste and then what they actually make.
And I really wish somebody had told this to me, is that if you're watching this video, somebody wants to make videos, right? And all of us who do creative work, we get into it. And we get into it because we have good taste. Do you know what I mean? Like, you want to make TV because you love TV. You know what I mean? Because there's stuff that you just love. It's like there's a gap. That for the first couple of years that you're making stuff, what you're making isn't so good, okay? It's not that great. It's really not that great. It's trying to be good. It has ambition to be good, but it's not quite that good.
And he does a brilliant job of outlining this. This is my favorite go-to clip of all time as encouragement that when you're learning a new thing, it's okay if the end result of what you just made doesn't match what you feel you are capable of. This is so beautiful. And his solution through it is to keep trying and keep making and don't give up. Because most people give up before they actually end up getting to that stage where when they finish something, they can say, I'm actually proud of that.
A lot of people never get past that phase. A lot of people at that point, they quit. And the thing I would just say to you with all my heart is that most everybody I know who does interesting creative work, they went through a phase of years where they had really good taste. They could tell what they were making wasn't as good as they wanted it to be. They knew it felt short, didn't have this special thing that we wanted it to have. And the thing I would say to you is everybody goes through that. And for you to go through it, if you're going through it right now, if you're just getting out of that phase, or if you're just starting off and you're entering into that phase, you got to know it's totally normal. And the most important possible thing you could do is do a lot of work.
But it's not the full picture. I wish that there was a sentence continued. I'm sure somewhere he's got continued thoughts on this, and this is a conversation I'd love to have with Ira one day. But what he doesn't talk about is what you do when you actually do get better. You see, I had the assumption that when you're a beginner, you will grow your skill set to a stage where now you can do stuff with your skills, and ideally, you can make a project that you're proud of. That stage is incredible. That is such a beautiful moment to finally make something that you like. That is what I hope everyone who aspires to make things can experience. But what happens when you're now improving your taste and you've improved your skills, but you realize by improving both of those things, how much further you have yet to go? And people don't really talk about this stage that happens where your skills are now better and your taste is now better. And even though you're now maybe 10 times improved your current skill set and you've finished things now that you like, to start the next thing, to finish the next project, you are now so aware of all of its mistakes, all of its shortcomings, all of the areas that you could have done better. And this is so painful about documentary work because it is clear as day once the project is over and you're done recording the cameras. When you get home and import that footage, you know immediately, I know on the drive home what I messed up already. I just see the areas where I fell short. And it feels insurmountable to finish things sometimes. And that's compounded. The more you care even, it seems the harder it becomes. The more I care about a project does not help me. It makes it harder. It makes it harder for me to accept that I'm a human who is making it because I want to do a really good job. And because I've learned some more things, I can see all the areas that I fall short. Some of my mistakes I'm so intimate with because I keep making them over and over and over again, right? And now I've made hundreds of things. And so I get to see those mistakes across lots of things. And so the next time I make those mistakes, I ask myself, why are we here again? Why am I doing the same thing? Why am I still falling short in these areas? And it makes it feel like complete paralysis from actually finishing something. And that's the discussion I want to have today, actually finishing something, getting it out the door. And how for years I didn't know And I assumed that I wasn't a perfectionist. And I think I was framing this the wrong way. I always assumed that perfectionists were kind of your OCD types, people that were super clean and organized, had their lives together, had calendars that they always stuck to, and were really on the ball, and they were perfectionists. Yet, in my life, time and time again, I'm prevented from finishing things because I want them to be perfect. I want them to be perfect to my original vision. And when they're not, and when I sense that there's areas that they fall short, I just completely lock myself down, shut myself down. My self-talk goes brutal, and I'm unwilling to even open the project file and look at the footage I shot. Because filming is the funnest thing in the world for me. Specifically, the stuff that I like making, I love filming. And this discussion today is about finishing things. And right now, I'm in this stage where I am yet again facing this perfection paralysis in a way that is 5 years and counting. It's super emotional for me, actually, and I don't want to get too emotional out of the gate here, but I'm facing this again. And the problem is I've beaten it before. And so I believe that because I beat it before, that, the next time I face it, it should be easier, right? So I just assume I go into the scenario completely oblivious to the fact that I need to get myself mentally prepared to overcome this every single time there's a project I care about. Every single time there's a project Levi cares about, he has to face the realities of the mistakes. That is a discussion that I forget to have with myself. And if you do that discussion in a way that's healthy, I think it can really help you realize, oh snap, I'm actually in a mode of paralysis here. And the reason why I'm not making progress is because of myself. There's no one else to blame here. And so this is actually kind of a freeing moment when, at least for me, when I wake up to what's happening inside of my brain creatively and why I'm struggling. So this is a discussion that I'm excited to have, especially because it's a talk that I need to have with myself. And I want to do this in 2 parts. So I want to share an example of where I faced this in the past in a pretty massive way, and then look at some of the things that help me get out of it. So actually get kind of practical, at least for myself. And then maybe at the end, I'll share a little bit about the current problem that I'm facing some perfectionism with. So hello, friend. Welcome to the Adventure Film Academy show. My goal here is to help you finish things you're proud of. That's what this is all about. I want to have more discussions with people who are actually showing up and trying to get it done, and get unapologetically technical about both the internal process of becoming better storytellers and then also just the practicality, the technicality. And I've had so much fun reading through your comments on the latest episodes on YouTube. If you're listening to this in the audio feed, I just want to let you know that the best place to have discussions about this is over on the YouTube episodes themselves. I will see all those comments, and I think this is just a great place to interact and kind of develop a community around the show. So I would appreciate seeing your input there, because I value your perspective. Even if you're just listening audio, later when you're done, pop open the description of the episode, go over to the YouTube link, and I'd love to have you there. And also the benefit is there's going to be some other special stuff that ends up on the Adventure Film Academy YouTube channel itself. So I want to take us into a moment that's very personal for me. And this is the last time that I faced this massive perfectionism paralysis. And I want to describe exactly what it looked like and how hard it was to be in it, and how it took me years to find a way to even make some sort of step forward. But I like this because of all the areas that I've failed at for myself personally. It's an area that I managed to overcome it for me. And I like talking about this kind of stuff, especially where we feel we fell short, because that's a discussion that just you get to have with yourself. That's a discussion that I have with myself. I often hear from people when I have these conversations publicly, they push back against me and they say, don't worry, Levi, you're doing fine. You're doing great even. We're proud of you. And that frustrates me because I want to be doing better, right? Most people don't spend even a fraction of a percent thinking about me. I'm the only human who has to live my own existence. And when I find that existence is not lining up with who I want to be, I find that uncomfortable. this is bringing up the phrase never settle for me. And I think it's important to have that conversation with yourself because you're the only person that has to live 100% of your own existence. And so settling for someone else's standards is not a wise thing to do. Like for most of us, when we're learning how to make video and we go to a Thanksgiving dinner with family or something like that, cousin Timmy or Aunt Susan might come up to you and say, "Oh, you've been learning how to make videos. We've seen your mom post them on Facebook. Good job. Like, great. You're doing awesome." And meanwhile, you know there's so much further to go. And so if you responded to your aunt and said, they're not very good, they would try to tell you, no, they're good. And meanwhile, in your head, you know, well, they're not actually there yet. And that's not a conversation that's realistic to have. Like when people are telling you, like good job on your third video, you know, you should just take it. Just say thank you. But if you settled for their standard, we all know that bar is pretty dang low. What we know is we want to make better things than what Aunt Susan thinks is amazing at Thanksgiving. We want to make something that we personally feel is great. And no one else can set that standard for you. If someone from an external lens is telling you, hey, you should be okay with what you've done, for me, that just never works, right? And it is true that you need to know where enough is enough and where you've actually done well, because you can just talk yourself into this toxic spiral of just pessimism. And so I want to encourage you that this conversation leads to a healthy place. It leads to being a satisfied maker. But to get there, we need to go to the deep, dark stuff of the gap, of the struggle between what you see in your head and what you actually end up making in person. So it was 2017. And at this point, I had been making slackline videos for a while. I had successfully made some that I was quite proud of. And that felt incredible. And my friend Spencer, a slackliner, invited me to go down to the desert with them and film them re-rigging what is the most famous high line in North America, in between the Rectory and Castleton, these two spires. When this line was originally walked, it was one of the only moments, well, only is the wrong word. It's one of the few slackline walks that went truly viral, because this was at a time where records were being broken multiple times a year. The distance, the type of webbing that they were being walked on, male, female records. And this was one of the records that your Aunt Susan would post about on Facebook. Like people saw this one and it created a buzz outside of the slacklining world. Most records kind of hang out inside of the slacklining adjacent outdoor community. This one exploded. And to go back down there and rig it for only the second time, and also have my friend Mia get a chance to walk it, because for her, if she crossed this line, it would have been a woman's world record. And so this was a project that I was incredibly excited about. And at the time I had been recording this web series that I was still trying to figure out its form. And we were calling that the Slack Life series, because I made a full length film. And then I thought, well, how do you follow that up? Well, I guess you make a web series. And my goal had been to find sponsors that would help pay for the web series. That had kind of been my plan. But that plan wasn't materializing. Apparently, there's not many brands that benefit from slacklining videos going viral. And we made the plan to go down to Utah, and I was just going to self-fund filming another episode, filming another project. And I packed up my cargo van. It was basically a bare metal shell, and we drove all the way down to the Utah desert. I convinced my friend Nick that it would be a great idea for him to come and film as well. And so this was special for me because we had two people filming, and that was pretty rare in my life. And we went down there, and it was one of the harder shoots I've had in recent. It was hard. It was hard for a lot of reasons. It was hard for reasons that I struggle to put to words on camera, because it's about the interpersonal dynamics with people as you're actually there in person making a project. And the reality is, on this project, we were meeting a lot of new people, and we were making a video, and Spencer was on board with it, and Mia was on board, but there was so many people involved in the project that didn't care. And they don't need to care, but if they are hostile towards it, it makes actually completing the project incredibly difficult. It makes finishing it really hard. It makes it really hard when you're there and some of the main people involved aren't happy that you're filming. I think that's the most I'll explain about the struggle personally with people while we were there filming. But out of the gate, while we were working on this project, I struggled to build the buy-in with the people we were filming as a whole to embrace that we were making a project about Mia walking the longest highline in the world. And that's okay. People don't have to buy in, but it's a little startling when it kind of gets you right in the face. And to be clear, Mia and Spencer, incredible people. They were awesome. So I was just struggling while working on this, and there was a massive desert tower that we had to climb up to be able to film from the top of. And in order to climb it, there was ropes rigged all the way up the wall, and you had to attach to it with your ascenders and climb the wall. And the way it works is that you have to climb one at a time. And climbing takes a long time. So every single day that we were there filming, we filmed for 10 days straight on this. The lineup in the morning trying to get up the wall was nasty. And even among people themselves on the teams, everyone was kind of quite tense about who got to go up when, who got to go up first, what order, who walked the lines when. And the result was usually the filmers were the last on the list. Fair enough. And that meant there was several key moments I completely missed. I will never forget the feeling of just utter hopelessness where Mia had gone out on the slack line and walked it halfway, almost crossed, and then took a catch. So I thought the walk that she was doing was going to be her world record. And as that's happening, you really want to film it well. And she walked and she caught. And I thought, okay, I was filming currently there from the ground. So let me paint the scene. It's these two towers. The line is rigged. Mia's walking up there. And I'm on the ground in between the two towers trying to get these different shots of Mia crossing. And we think she's about to set a world record, and then she catches the line. And so I'm thinking in my head, okay, I've got these awesome shots from the ground of her starting this walk. Let's go up the tower and get shots from actually at the anchors. So you can have a mixed perspective, and then we'll edit it together into all one walk. That was kind of the idea I had. And this ends up happening quite often where you mix together footage from different walks because it's so hard to get various coverage that actually is unique angles as someone's simply just walking a line that's hundreds of meters long. So I climbed up with the camera gear and we were waiting up there at the end of the day. And the way things worked out that day, Mia didn't get back on the line. And I was thinking to myself, it was very hard to carry my camera bag up here. Too hard even. Maybe I should leave it up here on the tower. We will go down, import footage, and I will have an easier way to climb the tower the next day. That was my thought. So next day comes and Mia's pretty psyched about getting back on the high line. And the way it worked out is my order in the people climbing up the fixed lines, even though I was there at 5:30 in the morning, got bumped pretty fast down the list. And there was a bit of a miscommunication, and suddenly Mia is out there on the high line and I'm at the bottom without my camera. And this was brutal for me. I mean, it's interesting to look back on it and have like some perspective, but this was one of my least favorite filming moments in my life where the project that I was so excited to film Mia do felt impossible because I didn't have my camera, because it was up on a tower and I was at the bottom and Mia was on the slack line about to break a world record. And that just felt, man, it's so rough when you're investing. No one's paying me. I'm making this because I want to, and I want to do a good job. And right now I can't do a good job because I don't have my camera. It just feels so frustrating. Thankfully, Nick, the guy that was there filming with me, had a personal drone with him that was not as good quality as the main one that we had been using. But that didn't matter because all the cameras were at the top of the spire and Nick had his personal drone with him down there. So luckily, we got this drone up and had to recalibrate. It was a bit of a disaster. We ended up getting this drone up in the air. The gimbal was tweaking out, but we got some usable shots of Mia finishing the line and breaking the world record. So we got the conclusion. We actually got her crossing, but I didn't have the handheld, cinematic, high quality. Already out of the gate, the quality of that footage was massively deteriorated. And this was just such a hit to me because that's the conclusion, right? Like that's what you're there for with the story, is to get this moment. Driving home from this experience, I was very frustrated with lots of aspects about how I handled the whole experience. I was learning about how to do the dynamic with athletes better. I learned a lot about never leave your camera at the top of a spire when you might not have access to it the next day when someone's breaking a world record. I felt sort of relieved that we had the conclusion of Mia's walk, but I just knew there was holes in the story that I didn't get out of the people while we were there. And at this time, I was trying to make it into a documentary that would play at a film festival and not have any voiceover from me, the director. And so we went home, and this was 2017, and I proceeded to continue to try to find sponsors. I tried to find people who would pitch in money for this project, and I really struggled. And at a certain point, I had been making project after project that would take me 2 weeks to film and then 3 months to edit. And most of those projects weren't making much money, if any money. And I was usually spending massively more on making them than I was receiving back from any like monetary return, which is fine. You don't need to, I was paying for all of this with client work, but at a certain point I had to wisen up and decide, okay, maybe I need to slow down how many free things I'm making and try to find a way to fund this. And what happened was a year went by, and usually I finished a project at least within the year of when the event happened. And to be clear, when I got home, before we even got home, in the day after she set the record, I edited together a highlight of her actually walking the line beginning to end as an announcement that Mia broke the record. Because that's kind of important news in the highlining world, and you want to let people know that this cool event happened. So I had already gotten a piece out about it, and people knew, hey, there's another film coming, like a full story. And so a year went by, and then I kind of got invested in some other projects, and then we started converting our van again and getting ready to go to Alaska. And at any point, it felt like, hey, if I just spent 2 months on this, I could probably edit it together into a finished deliverable. But I knew in the back of my head all of the holes it had story-wise, and that just bummed me out massively. I was so bummed. I was so frustrated with the places that I had made mistakes. And so that made it where I didn't even want to open the project file. This is the kind of thing where it really does take a long, concentrated effort over weeks to get familiar with the footage that you recorded and edit it together into something beautiful, edit together into something that's respectful of what happened. And I was unwilling to even import the footage into an editor. That's kind of the place that I had found myself in. This went on for easily 4 or 5 years, where every year kind of I'd talk with the slackliners and they would say, hey, when's that piece from Utah coming out? And I would say, next year, like, a couple months. And I just kept pushing it off. And I was never willing to have the conversation with myself about why I was unwilling to work on it. And this is where I think some of the key lessons that I need to keep reminding myself of really lie, is what happens when suddenly I realize, okay, I've now said multiple times I'm going to do this and I haven't. And I've told myself, okay, we will get this done sometimes, but now years have gone by, multiple winters, several winters, 5 years, and we haven't done it. So on one hand, there's a practicality of, okay, you need to feed yourself and your family, so you can't keep doing free projects. But then on the other side, I'm into this because I like making films, and I'm going to make films about what I want to make them about, regardless if they make money. So why haven't I finished this one? I spent so much time on it. Other people spent time on it. Nick spent time on it. I invested so much money into making it, to filming it. Why won't I finish this and get this out there into the world? And what happens in myself when I am willing to start thinking in that way is I suddenly have like an aha moment where I realize, okay, I either need to quit this project and say I won't finish it, or I need to face reality and figure out what's going on inside of me that's preventing me from working on it. And most often what's preventing me is this perfection paralysis. And it's beautiful to me when I finally realize that that's what's happening, because then I go through an internal process of acknowledging it step by step and then hopefully overcoming it. And when I've labeled it as, when I've figured out that the reason why I'm blocked isn't because I will just do it tomorrow. because I can go months telling myself that. I can tell myself for months, hey, I'll get into it tomorrow, and then just conveniently never get into it, right? I mean, I know I'm not alone in that. I know I'm not the only person who says, yeah, I'll get to that. I'll get to that tomorrow. And then I don't. And this is so much stronger of a resistance when it's something I deeply care about. Like my inability to make any amount of forward progress exponentially increases when I care so much about it and I want it to be good. My willingness to even start trying is completely constricted. It feels impossible. It feels like getting the footage up on the computer feels like we can't do that. And it is completely irrational. It is completely not logical, but that barrier is as real as ever. Stephen Pressfield wrote a book called The War of Art, and he beautifully outlines this concept of resistance and how we as creatives need to overcome that resistance on a daily basis. Otherwise, it will snuff us out. It will just completely shut us down. And my resistance when faced with the humanness of things I've made in the past is fierce. My ability to self-sabotage is incredible. It's next to none. And I think actually having frank discussions about why I'm feeling that perfection paralysis in the first place is what then helps me get through it. So before I address what I actually ended up doing, let's kind of look at some of that. So let's talk about what are some of the signs that I've noticed in myself, at least, where this perfection paralysis is present. Like, how can I tell that it's happening? And then I would love to hear from you. Like, if you relate to this and you also feel some of these issues, frustrations, I would love to hear your perspective on what this shows up as in your life. And I'm sure this is kind of an episode that I think might need to become an annual episode, because I keep thinking that when I beat this once, I've got it figured out. Yet every single time I run into a project I care about, I encounter it again. It's not going away anytime soon. The more skills I develop, the more fierce the resistance seems to be, which is so frustrating. It's just, man, it's very difficult for me. So what are the signs of avoidance in me? I can tell I'm avoiding a project with this kind of perfection paralysis if I'm in a deep dive learning. So when we go into our mental cave and we're learning a new skill set, or we're researching some piece of equipment that we want to use for our projects, I can tell at a certain point when I'm kind of doing that for too long. Especially if I have the project there in front of me and I'm off here learning about, the most obscure specific skill set that has nothing to do with my project. The learning feels productive, and that's why it's dangerous. It is so fun to learn things. And so I can tell, okay, right now we're researching cinema cameras and the best lighting package to put together with the anamorphic lenses that I want to use. Like, wait, my budget's $500. We're not going to be using a cinema camera. Why am I investing so much of my time learning and researching into something that is not even remotely helpful for my current problem? Because my current problem is pretty big, and that learning over here has nothing to do with what I actually in reality need to do. So if you find yourself in that spot, I think it's fun to ride the wave of learning. But at a certain point, you have to ask yourself, if you're disappointed that you haven't finished something and you keep wanting to research more things, you kind of have to close yourself. You kind of got to hold yourself off for a little bit, right? You kind of got to say, okay, it's time to stop researching, watching all these videos on this next lens that you want to try. And it's time to actually realize, okay, maybe I need to learn a technique for better processing my audio for this exact project, like the exact thing I'm working at. So I go through these phases where I deep dive learning on whatever my interest takes me to. And then I do reality, which is try to learn what happens when I'm trying to do the work, because it's fun to research, no problem. But right now I'm trying to redesign a specific website for the launch of our course coming up. And I can spend my time doing other research on strategy and theory and how to create the best landing pages, or I can actually open the website editor and encounter a problem and then solve each problem that I encounter at a time. So I was trying to I was trying to align an image in the right way on our hero section of the Adventure Film Academy website. And I was just running into so many issues. And that was the learning I actually needed to do to make forward progress, was to actually figure out how to embed this image properly. I didn't need to be researching, a 10-step process for excellent landing pages. That was not the right step. So I find I'm in avoidance when I'm just deep into learning. Unrealistic expectations despite constraints. So this happens to me over and over and over again, where it happens in two tiers, where one, I set myself back from the start because I take on something which the scope is bigger than my current skill set or lifestyle can actually complete. I get so excited and I go, man, let's go film this next thing, without acknowledging that, hey, if I'm going to film a project about that, it's going to take a massive amount of my time. In fact, if I want to follow that athlete across the year, the kind of project we're talking about here from an editing standpoint is going to be massive. So I need to be frank with myself. Do I actually have the space to take this on? Or am I just being outrageous? Are my expectations completely out of whack with reality? And this is actually where I made some of my first breakthroughs mentally, where I wanted to make my first documentary that I was proud of, and I was struggling to do that. And the reason why I was struggling is because I kept trying to make these massive projects that were way beyond my skill set and ability to actually follow through on. And I failed time and time again at these big, massive heartthrob documentaries that were super important on really relevant cultural topics. And I was failing at them. I wasn't even filming the first shots of them. That's how bad they were going. So what I did was I put a date on the calendar and I said, if I don't finish the film by this date, then I've got to quit filmmaking. Like, that's my story of how I finally made something that I liked. I'd been doing so much research and practice and I wasn't applying it. And so I said, hey, by the end of this date, you got to make something you're proud of. And what I did is I put a time on the calendar to go film. So I took time off work to go film the thing. And as it turns out, in 5 days, I could film almost everything I needed to make this first film. When I put dates, when I gave it realistic constraints, suddenly my momentum started to build. It's like a train that from a complete stop, it's very hard to get it going. But whatever you can do to get it to move that first inch, the second inch is easier. And then the third, and then the fourth. And once you carry that momentum forward, suddenly it just feels like you're just a force to be reckoned with, and you're pulling in. Everyone's excited to see you move forward and get it done, and they're willing to help, and people want to be involved. And it's contagious to kind of be around that energy where someone is laser focused on actually getting the job done. So unrealistic scope is a massive one. I've taken on a project that's way too big. And then the other unrealistic thing is being unhonest, like not being honest with myself about what were my limitations when we actually filmed. So if the filming didn't go well, if there was mistakes I knew I made, and I'm unwilling to start editing my footage because I want it to be better than it actually is, I just need to have a frank discussion with myself and actually outline, okay, where does this project fall short? This is one of the most freeing exercises that I can think of when I feel perfection paralysis, which is, okay, I'm struggling to get this project finished in the editing phase because I wish that I had filmed it better. I wish that it had been a better story. So let's write out the areas that I feel it fell short. Let's write those out exactly. Hey, this didn't work well because I completely botched the audio for the whole first day, and that's really bumming me out. This didn't work well because I didn't choose a good objective for the trip. And so the narrative that I'm trying to articulate through the story is actually pretty convoluted and it's stressful. It's not clear. Hey, this isn't working out because I filmed too much subject matter and I don't actually know where my story is. So I feel like I missed the heart of what was actually happening here. Oh man, in my interviews, I know I didn't ask the right questions to get the audio that I need to actually build this out for something that's going to have emotional impact. And that's just so sad. If we write this out, two helpful things about this, it allows you to then maybe improve in the future. So hopefully the next project you work on, you can take those lessons forward and actually maybe do a better job. But then two, it allows you to acknowledge, okay, the ingredients that we have to work with here maybe aren't ideal, but we've named what they are. Let's address, okay, there is some good here, right? Because if there's not, then just scrap it. Just call it a wash. But there must be some good there. So then when we're realistic about the constraints that we actually had because of our skill set, let's be real here. We cause issues. And if we're honest about what those are, that suddenly just feels like a breath of fresh air where it goes, it's okay for me to now 7 years later edit this video knowing that the version of me that shot it was less experienced. And I don't need to keep spending my time being mad at younger me. I can just accept this was made by a less experienced filmmaker. So let's do what we can. Let's do a creative exercise to solve it. So my kind of general rule of thumb that I arrive at is, for my personal standards, for most things that I make and try hard at, my goal is to be above 7 out of 10 in my quality benchmark. And that's super ambiguous. But for me, that means, to take a project, understand where it's limited, and then get it to a place where it's above a 7 out of 10 is fantastic. That is an absolute win in my book. And sure, if we spent 2 more months, we could probably take it from a 7.5 to maybe an 8, or maybe an 8 to an 8.5. But then I can be realistic with myself and go, okay, well, how much time does this project deserve? And is it worth trying to take it from a 7 to an 8? At least then I can have that discussion with myself and then maybe invest that more time because I think it's actually worth it. But my goal and my standard that I'm trying to reach is to be my 7 out of 10. I'm not going for 9 or 10 out of 10s for my personal standards. There's not many things I ever make that hit those benchmarks. And I have a hunch that it might always feel that way as my taste and my skill set improves. So to be realistic with myself, that 7 out of 10 number for me, fantastic. When I go and do a public speaking thing or a workshop or something, that's kind of my joke with when I call Janelle. Like, she knows it went well if I call her and I say, yeah, it was a 7.5 out of 10. Like, that's a great session. We're in a bad place if we're at 5 out of 10, right? Like, that's ooh boy. I don't want to be in that zone. That's not where I want to create. And I don't want too many 5 out of 10s in a row. And sometimes you need to finish projects that are 5 out of 10s and you just go, yikes. And sometimes it just feels good to close the chapter and acknowledge that it's not as good as you want. But for me, if it's a project that I've invested my heart into and I care about it, I want it to be above a 7. And 7 is good enough. And this is where the phrase done is better than perfect keeps coming in. And the reality is, with documentary editing, so much of the writing is in the edit, where you have to make a narrative that is logical for the viewer to experience. And to say done is better than perfect, it's like, yes, but to get to done is insurmountable sometimes. So simply getting to done is very, very, very hard. And so it's not like, oh, we just need to reduce our standards and finishing will be easier. No, finishing is still going to be just as hard to get to that first completed step. And I've long believed that if you want different results than other people, you have to do different things than other people. So the often go-to advice around some of this stuff, it's sometimes good for me to just press in and check with my gut on, how do I actually feel about that? Does it feel good to end the project now, or should I put in that extra effort to take it to that next level and kind of hone in and trust my instincts there? So what I did with this film that I was struggling to get done, it was filmed in 2017 and then 2018 and 2019 and 2020, and years went by, kids were born, and I had to ask myself, okay, Levi, are you going to get this done? And I went through several months of delay again. And that hurt because I'd done this song and dance many times with this very project. And so what I did is I went, okay, clearly I'm disappointed with the version of me that filmed this. So what I need to do to actually make progress is give myself some constraints. Constraint number 1, acknowledge my limitations. Where did I make the mistakes? Just name them. And then constraint number 2, put dates on the calendar where I have to get it done. Force myself to finish a version of it. And this continues to be, I think, the most important editing advice for myself ever. Do whatever it takes to get to a rough edit. And do that ideally as fast as possible. Because again, once you have the ingredients in your hands, then you can decide what you can make with it. If you watch any of those cooking shows where the ingredients are a surprise, people don't even know what, like, if you blindfolded someone and said, okay, make something with these surprise ingredients, and they're completely blindfolded, the likelihood that they make something good is zero. Right? Someone can't make a piece of baking when they are picking up flour and baking soda and can't tell the difference. Maybe a master baker can. So if you don't know the ingredients that you're working with, it's impossible to finish something. So what you need to do is get your hands sunk into the material and actually look at it. See it on your timeline. Look at your sound bites. Look at your B-roll selects. Acknowledge this is the stuff I have to work with, and try to shape it into something in a linear order that isn't fancy, that doesn't have gimmicks, that doesn't have fancy intros, fancy maps, fancy titles, fancy music. Just get it onto a timeline in an edited form as a rough draft as fast as you possibly can. Because you can delay doing that for years. In my case, almost a decade. 3 years shy of a decade. So I put a time on the calendar and I said, okay, these 2 weeks are my 2 weeks to make this film, and I have to finish it in these 2 weeks. And once I tell myself that, it's game on. And it's so freeing to go, okay, now here we go. We're into it. Let's just get it done. And the amount of pain that I caused myself by not giving myself the limiter of 2 weeks, because I spent months stressing about this. Months, multiple times over multiple years. And my perfectionism prevented me from saying, let's just spend 2 weeks on it. And what I experienced in those 2 weeks were, okay, with my new storytelling voice, I can actually solve a lot of the problems that I encountered in the first version. The first version being, my intent when I was holding my camera in hand was to make a certain kind of film. And my voice, when I came back to it years later, was a different storytelling voice. It was one that was willing to use my narration as a filmmaker to make it into a story that's viewable. That's kind of a style that I had to develop over time on YouTube. And so I brought that style back to this piece that wasn't originally filmed in that way. And thank goodness I had some of this behind the scenes footage. So I recrafted this story where I brought in myself as a character, something that made me uncomfortable, but it was a good solution to the problem I had, which was I didn't have enough sound bites to create the story. So then I could use my voiceover to kind of bring it all together, do narration, and make it make sense. Make it a viewable experience for an audience member who wanted to watch it. And after 2 weeks, I had something playable, but I was actually quite excited about it. I thought, hey, this turned out better than I thought it would. I think I want just a little bit more time. And at that point, because I had a playable film, great. If you feel at this stage it needs a little bit more time, then take the little bit more time. You've earned it. And that's what I did. I took another week and I worked on it a little more. And I'm so glad I took that extra week because I was able to finesse it a little more, tighten things up here and there. And what I ended up with was a piece that I could actually say, hey, I like that. I'm proud of that. I understand the constraints that went into making it. I knew I was honest about the ingredients and the ones I was missing. And this is a 7 out of 10 easily. Like, I am proud of this. That feeling is just utterly fantastic. It doesn't need to take 7 years. And for most of my projects, it doesn't. But especially with the ones that you care more about, it can happen where you go years and years. And going through this process of, for me, acknowledging where my perfectionism is holding me back, where I'm not being honest with myself about what was actually taking place when I filmed it, and my realistic expectations and limitations, that conversation can be really healthy for me. I would love to hear from you what areas you allow your perfectionism to actually prevent you from doing the work. Because it's super clear to me that we need to do the work. right? There's no debate there. You have to show up and do it. So why are we not doing it? Why are we not starting? Why, when we start something, do we not take it over the finish line? And time again, it's because I want it to be better than my skill set was capable. Man, that's painful to say. And I think it just saying that with my words allows me to just kind of take a breath of fresh air, be kind on myself, and be realistic. So that's where I promised you that this conversation would have a positive end, where I am so proud of the version of me that got the film done. I'm a little pissed off at the version of me that took 7 years, but I'm so glad that I didn't just give up. And that film, if you haven't seen it yet, you can find it on the YouTube channel. It became a part of the Slack Life series. It was maybe going to be a standalone thing, but it became kind of one of the final episodes of that series. And it's called Walking on Air. You just give that the search on YouTube, you'll encounter it. And on the YouTube version of this podcast episode, I was putting some clips of it over. And man, this is a discussion that we're just going to have to keep coming back to, because I find myself in this place again where while we were filming in 2017, I was making active steps towards getting ready to make my first online course for learning adventure filmmaking. And that was one of the things that Nick was there and we had been talking about was, hey, Nick, I need some behind the scenes footage of me working. So that way, when I make the course, there's footage that I can intercut and kind of put into that. And teaching's been a really big part of my YouTube experience because I encountered so many questions in the comments of certain videos. And I started to realize that it's actually so much fun to interact with people who want to know how certain things happened. And it's one of the most rewarding things about this online creating dynamic where people will send me videos they made and say something I taught them helped. And that is addictive. It is so fun to be helpful to people and actually be a part of them finishing something. Like that is just addicting. And I realized, okay, it would be really cool if I could put together a whole beginning to the end online experience for people, because I had started to do in-person ones. And I love the in-person ones, but it's so expensive for someone to be able to travel somewhere. Not everyone can take the time off work. And while those are life-changing memories that we have as a group when we're doing an in-person learning experience, I'd love to take that onto the internet. And so we're now 9 years later and there's no course. And it's not super important to you at home, all the intricacies of it, because honestly, it probably doesn't matter that much to you that it's been a 9-year journey for me. But it's been very hard on me to figure out why I'm not making progress. Because when I tell you that I've done the busy work, I had the platform built and set up for the online course 5 years ago. I had researched the best way to do a launch sequence. I had researched the best way to teach the material. I had figured out what my material actually was, which arguably was some of the hardest work to do. I figured out what my message was about how to teach the way that I make videos. And I felt completely unable to put that together into an edited course and say, here it is. And there's more reasons behind why I've struggled with that. And that is my current thing that has been my perfectionism problem. And I came to that realization last year as yet again I failed. We've got to kind of assess, is this something that I actually want to do? And to be honest with myself, all the layers of this is something I really want to do. I really want to do this podcast. I really want to have an ongoing conversation with people that make things. I really want to get nerdy about filmmaking and cameras and technology and the way things are changing. I want to interview people. I want to talk about how they make things. I want to be helpful. I want to make awesome bite-sized tips that go out to people. I want to be someone that is giving more than I'm taking. I want to I love the idea at this stage of being someone who helps people with their own voice. That gets me fired up. And so I really want to do this, right? These are the things that I want to do. And yet, when I was in this state of utter paralysis, I was unwilling to do even the smallest bite-sized version. I'd completely closed myself off and just suffocated my ability to even make an Instagram story that was like, hey, here's a tip on something that I've learned about adventure filmmaking. Here it is. I was unwilling to even do that. I just completely clamped myself down. And so, as frustrating as it is with myself to not show up for something I care about, I mapped out a pathway forward, and we're going to. So this isn't a sales pitch. I have no ambition to sell you anything right now. I'm just trying to be honest with you about a way that I failed massively. And I went around the sun multiple times without even realizing that I was failing at it because of perfectionism. And so we put that date on the calendar and we're moving towards it, and it's terrifying. But the good part is that things are getting done. We're making progress. Instead of researching some next best teaching technique, I'm actually doing the work of getting ready to do this launch. I've hired on some people to help. I've spent a scary amount of money to do that, but it's accountability at this point. I need help to get it done. And I've brought in people to help me with the process that I was struggling with, which is actually the launching of it. And here we go. It's happening. And this is something that I'm going to look back at this year as being the year where I finally beat my stupid inner voice that was telling me it's not going to be good enough. And I'm hoping I can look forward 5 years from now, after running many online experiences with people that want to make better videos, tell better stories, and I can look back with just gratitude that we did it the first time. That's my hope. But man, is that first time hard. So as I face this new massive version of perfection paralysis, it's just a reminder to me that I think I'm going to be facing some version of this for the rest of my life, where the things I care deeply about, there's going to be a massive inner process that needs to take place to get them done. And it's not helping if I tell myself, this is supposed to be easy. This is supposed to be easy, right? Other people find this easy. Man, that's just not a helpful conversation. I think I'm deciding it's supposed to be hard. And hard is good. It's hard and it's good. And doing the work is rewarding. And I want to do the work. I don't want it to just be easy and effortless and take nothing. I want to invest a part of myself into it. And doing that work is so much better than being paralyzed. And I'm very good at sitting in that paralyzed state and doing anything but what I actually need to be doing. I would love to hear, again, your thoughts on this. I love this conversation back and forth. I invite you to head over to your podcast player of choice. Give us a review. It helps other people know that this is something worth their time. That's going to be it for this one. This is an episode of the podcast that I've thought about recording for a year and a half. And it's also a title, like this concept of perfectionism tried to ruin my life, is a title of a film that I've shot that I haven't released yet, that is utterly important to me. And one day when that comes out, it's going to feel like a cool full circle moment for me to be having these discussions where I'm actually acknowledging some of my big problems, which is perfectionism. So that's going to be it for this one. Thanks so much for watching, listening. Peace.